The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says at least 12 people have been killed in an Israeli attack. A spokesman for the ministry said missiles struck the Indonesian hospital in the north of the Gaza Strip. Heavy fighting was heard at the hospital and tanks have reportedly surrounded the facility. This comes after Israel's military carried out another night of operations inside Gaza. Explosions and flares were seen in the south of the region. Israel's army says its missile defense system also shot down a number of rockets coming from Gaza. DW special correspondent Aya Ibrahim is covering this story for us in Jerusalem, and she told us more about the attack on the Indonesian hospital.
Well, the WHO, the director of the WHO, has condemned the attack, saying that it was an appalling attack. And we know that, or we are told that this was a result of Israeli tank fire. And according to Gaza health officials in the Hamas-controlled Strip, 12 people died as a result of that attack, among them patients and medical staff. Israel says that terrorists had opened fire towards IDF troops operating around the hospital, and that Israel then targeted the source of enemy fire, but that no shells were fired toward the hospital itself.
Now, there have been in recent days warnings by the Israeli military to people in southern Gaza to leave from there, where they had previously been told to move for safety. What's the latest on that?
It's an unclear situation about what people are supposed to do, exactly what civilians at this point are to do. Nicole, remember, southern Gaza, the southern part of the Strip, is where the Israeli military had been telling civilians for weeks to evacuate to, supposedly because that would, keep them out of harm's way. And we're talking about one of the most densely populated spots on this earth, and asking its population to then squeeze in about half of that space had already drawn condemnation, a huge concern from humanitarian organizations. And now, over the past couple of days, we've heard reports that there are flyers being dropped on the southern part of the Strip asking people to evacuate. Unclear where they're supposed to go to exactly, as people have already, as I mentioned, been asked to evacuate south. At the same time, up until today, the Arabic-speaking spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces had been tweeting, urging people to evacuate from the north to the south into a safe zone that appears to be in the southern western part of the Strip. But it's difficult to imagine how much more people could really squeeze into a smaller piece of land, with already a dire humanitarian situation that humanitarian organizations have been warning about virtually nonstop for the past month or so.
Yeah. U.S. President Joe Biden says he believes the deal with Hamas regarding the hostages is close. Do we know any details on what this deal could look like?
Well, a deal like that is not done until it's done. We've heard from Qatari officials who have been the main negotiators, the main mediators in this deal, that what remains are logistical challenges. But remember, even with a deal like this, even logistical challenges can be very controversial and take time to implement. We've been here before. It feels like there were a number of deals that felt like they were going to come through, but then in the end fell apart. But what we are told, according to reports, again, no confirmation, that this deal would involve the returning of some 50 Israeli hostages, children, mothers, and the elderly. And in exchange, there would be some sort of pause of fire for a couple of days. Unclear just how many. This would, of course, come as a huge relief to the families of the hostages who have just been in absolute anguish and agony since the 7th of October. But again, these are all still reports, no confirmation yet. And with a deal like this, it's done only when it's done and these people are safely back home.
That was DW's Aya Ibrahim in Jerusalem. Thanks for that update. As we heard, U.S. President Biden says he believes a deal is close to free some of the hostages held in Gaza and temporarily pause the fighting to enable aid deliveries. Here's what we know about the hostages held by Hamas.
Bring them home. That's the message these protesters in Tel Aviv want their government to hear. Their mothers, fathers, siblings, cousins, held by Hamas for well over a month now.
I expect them to bring them back. That's the only goal. Nothing else matters. Not politics, not wiping out Hamas or not. None of that matters. There are over 200 civilian hostages here. They didn't do anything. They didn't take part in the war. They were taken from their homes.
Hamas took about 240 hostages during its deadly cross-border rampage into Israel on October 7th, ranging from 9 months old to people in their 80s. Dozens were migrant workers from Thailand, while many more were Israelis with dual citizenship: Russians, Germans, French, Argentinians, Americans, and many more. That's created enormous pressure internationally to get a deal done to release them. One of the few people to be released so far, 85-year-old Yovache Lifshitz. She described being held in tunnels and large halls under Gaza. Others may be held in hospitals or other facilities. This video released by the Israeli army allegedly shows one hostage being brought inside a Gaza hospital by Hamas gunmen. Israel's government says it's doing everything it can. We are prevented from discussing details of the prisoner deal that we are pushing for. We want them all back. Whether we do it in one stage or two, we will do it in a way that will return entire families. That's as clear as the sun. Qatar has been the center of negotiations. The country has close relations to Hamas. Meanwhile, the US, Germany, and other countries have set up meetings around the world to keep up pressure on negotiators. It's unclear what Hamas's demands are beyond a ceasefire, something Israel has until now refused.
Meanwhile, a group of premature babies evacuated from Gaza's besieged al-Shifa hospital has arrived in Egypt for urgent medical care. Medics brought the babies into Egypt via the Rafah border crossing, the only way out of Gaza that Israel doesn't control.
An urgent evacuation. Premature babies bundled into ambulances to get them out of Gaza. The World Health Organization says all of them are fighting serious infections. The babies had been trapped at Gaza's largest hospital for days. Several others died after incubators at al-Shifa stopped working amid power outages. United Nations teams helped coordinate the evacuation, working with Israeli soldiers to get the tiny patients out of the hospital, which Israel claims is home to a Hamas command centre. The babies were brought south, some reunited with their mothers.
I have twin daughters. I did not know about their condition. Today I saw them for the first time since I gave birth to them. Thank God I was reassured that they were fine. I was always communicating with Shifa, and they told me, "You can come and take them because their health has improved," but I could not reach them.
Waiting ambulances then whisked them across the Rafah crossing to Egypt, taking parents where possible.
They are innocent children, premature babies, toddlers. I left my 3 children in Gaza. I didn't even get a chance to hug them because I couldn't leave my daughter in this state. Something might happen to them. They could be bombed. My message to the world is enough. These are innocent children. We are just protecting our country, Palestine.
The children's agency UNICEF says it's working with Egyptian authorities to find out the circumstances of each evacuated baby, including those whose relatives are not with them. Doctors say they have a long road to recovery ahead, with many of them critically ill.
Ahmed Al-Mandari is the regional director for the Eastern Mediterranean at the World Health Organization, the agency that led this joint UN mission to evacuate the premature babies from the al-Shifa hospital. And I asked him how and where the babies are now.
Those 28 babies, in fact, shifted to Cairo today morning. 12 of them have been shifted to a hospital in the new capital, administrative capital in Cairo, and 16 of them remain there in hospitals in Al Arish. So, as you said in your report, the status of those 28 babies is really very critical, very bad.
Mm-hmm. But not all of the babies that were brought out of Shifa Hospital could be moved across the border, could they? Why is that?
We moved 31 babies, and as you mentioned, 28 of them moved to Cairo, 3 to Egypt. 3 of them remained there. Based on the information I received, recently, that their parents, their mothers, decided to keep them there in the hospitals in Rafah. So that's why, we have only 28 babies moved.
How difficult was the coordination of this evacuation with, heavy fighting, especially in and around Gaza City right now?
Yeah, I must say it was a very risky, very critical mission. But we decided, in collaboration with the Palestinian Red Crescent and other authorities to move forward and bring them from al-Shifa hospital. This is based on the visit our teams made 2 days back to al-Shifa hospital, and they have seen the critical situation there in the hospital as a whole. But definitely for those 31 babies, in that hospital lacking the basic healthcare facilities, risking their lives to death, in hours if we didn't move them.
You mentioned the baby's parents. Were they able to leave with them for Egypt, or are they stuck back in Gaza?
Yeah, we managed to get 4 mothers, joining their babies recently. But for the others, the Ministry of Health there and the Red Crescent, Palestinian Red Crescent, is working hard, to identify or to approach the parents and the mothers of the rest of the babies. And I'm sure soon they will be able to join them.
Mm-hmm. Looking more broadly at the situation inside Gaza and the attack on Gaza's Indonesian hospital that we heard of today, that is the last one still operating in the north of the Strip. What are you hearing from your colleagues on the ground?
The teams, our teams of WHO are, I just in fact finished a meeting 1 hour back with our teams there. And they said the hospital is considered as one of the largest hospitals in the north of Gaza, which serves around 300,000 people in that area, including 116,000 in Gabalia camp. It contains currently, around 700 people, including the staff, the patients, the relatives, as well as the displaced one, using it as a shelter. It is almost non-functioning, either due to the direct attack of the hospital and due to the lack of fuel, lack of medical supplies. So the situation there is really very bad, and we are worried. We are very worried about those people who are sick, admitted in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Are your colleagues aware of any Hamas activities in that facility?
I mean, according to the information we are receiving, from the teams there on the ground and inside the hospital, they do not see any sort of military operations by Hamas, in that hospital. It is full of patients, staff, relatives of the patients, and displaced people.
There are still many sick and injured people inside Gaza, close to the Rafah border, especially with Egypt. And the WHO has repeatedly warned about the growing threat of disease spreading there. What can you tell us about the efforts that are underway to try and help or evacuate people and help them to leave?
As I said, we are coordinating with the Egyptian authorities, the Ministry of Health and Population here in Egypt, as well as the Egyptian Red Crescent, as well as coordinating with the Palestinian authorities and the Palestinian Red Crescent and other UN agencies to move those injured patients, and they need, extra care and extra services in the Egyptian side. And I'm really sorry to say that, like for example, in the Shifa hospital, There are patients who are injured. Some of them had spinal injuries. Many of them started to have infections in the wounds, and doctors cannot operate on those with spinal injuries. And because of the lack of the services and the lack of water and electricity, the lack of the medical supplies, including anesthesia and sedating medications. So this is exactly happening in other hospitals in Gaza.
That was Ahmed Al-Mandari from the World Health Organization in Cairo. Thanks so much for those insights and for your time.